originating from the podcast studio inside FAM 360's headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. This is the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. The Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast is designed to encourage, equip, and inspire our audience through a combination of inspirational stories and real-life experiences shared by other successful and skilled leaders in a variety of vocations. We hope that the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast empowers each one of us to step out, step up, and ultimately thrive as leaders. Now here's our host, Mr. Matt Maloney.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Matt Maloney. I'm thrilled to continue my conversation today with John Flores, my friend and a great community and business leader. Today, though, we're gonna kind of step outside of business, the community. We're going to talk a little bit about your personal life. I'd love for the audience to learn a little bit more about you. And if you guys haven't heard and tuned into the first episode, I highly encourage that you do so. We learned several little nuggets, or I like to call them acorns of wisdom from John. Just, his mentorship, thriving through failure, how as leaders we need restoration, and how restoration comes in relationships, which helps in leadership, building equity in relationships, and a heart to listen, and several other really, really valuable components that John shared with us. But again, today we're going to talk a little bit about your family life. So why don't we start out there? Just tell the audience a little bit about your family.
Yeah.
Where'd you grow up, and then your current family and all that?
Yep. So born and raised in Houston, Texas. I am a 10th generation Texan. There is no 11th generation prior to our family. So we were one of the first four families to settle the state of Texas from Spain.
Yeah.
So as a Texan, Texans are already prideful about them being Texan, but we've got a little extra layer because we were kind of there first. And so actually, my daughter is an 11th generation Texan. She was actually born on Texas soil. So there is no 12th. So yeah, grew up in Houston, so cool. Born and raised an Aggie. My dad went to A&M. Yeah. I went to A&M, maroon blooded for sure. It's definitely a cult that I was indoctrinated in very, very early. Yeah. My dad was an oil and gas guy for 30 years, like a lot of guys in Houston are. Yeah. And then my mom was a 8th grade English teacher for a long time.
That's awesome.
Growing up, big baseball player, that was kind of my life. And then kind of fast forwarding to now, married to Amy, which I feel like I have to say this. I told her this at dinner last week. I said, Amy, you really are the most beautiful woman that I know. And she was like, oh, okay, whatever. And I was like, no. Like, I legitimately mean it. So I have totally outkicked my coverage. She's incredible. We are polar opposites. Maybe one step beyond the poles. So there's been a lot of sanctification and all of that over the last 12 years. We've been married 12 years. We have 4 kids, 11-year-old daughter whose name is Britton, 8-year-old daughter whose name is Charlie.
Which Britton is the 11th generation?
So they technically all are.
Okay.
Now, Charlie was actually born in Texas, but we did put a bag of Texas soil under Britton's hospital bed when she was born.
Of course you did.
So there's some more nuance to the story. 8-year-old daughter, Charlie, 5-year-old son, Fitz, and almost 4-year-old son, Duke. So we're extremely busy right now.
I was going to say there's not a dull moment in your household, right? Wow. I was going to ask you, what are you most proud about in your life? I think it's got to be family,
just
right?
Covered it.
Yeah,
for sure.
We just covered it. So why don't we kind of go back, looking back in your youth. I think everyone has, whether it's a positive example or a negative one. Is there a time or a person who set an example for you and you didn't maybe know it, you didn't quantify it or qualify it as leadership at the time, but who set an example of leadership for you in your youth, and now looking back with your, wisdom that you've gained over the years, you're like, wow, that person really set an example for me?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I was in 7th grade, so my family background's a little unique. It was not the best childhood. My parents were separated 4 times in 6 years between the ages of 8 and 14. Yeah. So right in the middle of that, in 7th grade, my parents actually separated one of those 4 times. Yeah. And it was just kind of this emotional pinball machine. Yeah. And I'll never forget one random Saturday morning, my dad was gone, and their relationship has been restored, which is the good news of this story. But I was in 7th grade, and on a random Saturday, there was a knock on our door. 9:00 in the morning, and it was my middle school soccer coach. And he just knew. My mom had kind of shared with some of my kind of key teachers, hey, this is what's going on at home. If you see anything, or if he's disconnected or emotional, like this is what's going on behind the four walls of our house. And he showed up and said, hey, we're just going to go. We're going to go for the day. And we went to the driving range. We went to a movie.
Wow.
We grabbed pizza, we grabbed ice cream, and he, dropped me off at 8:00 at night. And he continued to show up.
Yeah.
And now I could not articulate the importance of it as a seventh grader. But as I look back on that season of my life, there was a void in the household, right? In those formative years. Yeah. And a guy who had been married for 6 months, right? Kind of launching into his family, said, I gotta show up. I gotta pick this guy up. I gotta pick this kid up. And it's kind of started a theme of people who have showed up at the right time. Yeah. That kind of filled a void in my life.
Yeah. God has really put some of those people in. I mean, he does in all of our lives at the right time. We don't realize it at the time, but as reflecting back, we see it. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So Patrick Richardson, 7th grade soccer coach.
Wow. You still really keep up with him? I mean,
when we lived in Houston in the early 2010s, he and I would get together for lunch every couple months. Yeah. And so it was kind of good to reminisce and really kind of unpack what he was thinking, what he was aware of. I mean, he told me stories of when my mom told him that my dad had moved out, right? And what spurred him on to show up and pick me up. Sure. Right. Yeah. So it was unique hearing it from his perspective, kind of stepping into that.
Yeah. And he was a new husband, like you said, right? Yeah. So I was going to ask, did he have kids or was one of his sons on it? But no, that wasn't the case. Nope. He just saw, he saw the need and saw the opportunity. He was encouraged to go do to encourage you.
And didn't have to. Yeah. You're 6 months into marriage, you're Mexican food and movie nights, right?
That's it.
But he said, I'm going to take my Saturdays and step into this with this kid. So I really appreciated that.
Eating Tex-Mex.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that's great. One thing that I know about John is he is full of wisdom and full of a lot of quotes and different things that he's learned over time from a myriad of different people that you've had the privilege of being around, the people that have spoken into you. So what do you have a life motto, a quote, scripture, creed, if you will, that whether you live by it or not, but maybe it's just something that just resonates with you and it's something that stands out?
Yeah, there's a few that come to mind, but there's one that I really kind of land on. Some of the initial thoughts and kind of quotes and creeds are be accountable and dependable, be good and do good, right? And these are really kind of simple, ideals. My dad used to say, be a net giver, not a net taker. Yeah. When everything shakes out at the end of the day, have you given more than you've taken? Yep. And one of my mentors used to always say, when you don't know what to do, just do the next right thing. Don't do the next thing, do the next right thing. And it's a step and it's another step. But there's one that really kind of encompasses a lot of them is well done is better than well said. And as a 7 on the Enneagram, it's easy to be all talk, right? Yeah. And we've had some hard conversations in marriage about, hey, well, you said you were going to do and you didn't do. And so I've really kind of landed, it kind of puts skin around a lot of these ideas that well done is better than well said.
I love that. That's great. I know you've shared that with me before, and it resonated with me. And it's something that I took from when you've shared that with me before. I've taken that and talked about it even with my children, and specifically had a conversation with my 8-year-old son Manning about that. And I think that he was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do that," or I'll take care of that. And I talked about well done is better than well said, and and it was great. It was a great teaching moment. So. I think one thing that I know I struggle with constantly, there's a tug of war for us, particularly business leaders or community leaders, and that between the demands that we have at work and in our career and in the community, the things that we're attracted to that may be good, but they certainly take away from family life. But how... And everybody has their own kind of methodology or modus operandum of how they balance work and family life. But how do you do it? You're involved in so many different things. You're not just with your career, but you're on boards and you do different things that you volunteer for. And so how do you balance that?
I don't have it, detailed out in bullet point outline form.
Yeah, sure.
It's a few things for me. One is I want to be where my feet are. right? So if I'm home, I'm home.
Yeah.
If I'm in the office, I'm in the office.
That's good.
A lesson that I learned from my mom's dad, who was one of the greatest human beings I've ever met, taught me how to play golf, was an athlete, was funny, was a practical joker, was a hard worker. He was the youngest superintendent in the state of Texas, in his career. Is when he pulled into the garage every day. My mom tells this story all the time and cries about it. His briefcase never left the car.
Wow.
So he pulled into the garage and work physically was unable to be brought in.
Yeah.
Now we have iPhones.
It's different.
So what do? You put the iPhone in the closet.
Yeah.
From 5:30 to
that's our
8,
briefcase, essentially.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's really stuck with me of what does that look like for me to leave the briefcase in the car?
Yeah.
And honestly, and this is probably where I maybe can be better in the workplace is, my identity is not tied with what I do. And I know a lot of leaders that it is their identity. Their work is their identity.
Yeah.
It's just not mine. I love Promise 686.
Yeah.
But it's not who John is.
Right.
It's not my identity.
Sure.
I love it. I'm for it. I'm going to work hard and we're going to push the envelope and try to grow and make an impact. But I really feel like my identity is in the 5 human beings in the 4 walls of my house.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean I'm that great at it.
Sure.
Right? To be a husband and a dad. But trying to, when I'm with them, to be with them.
Yeah.
And that's just a huge kind of practical thing for me. When I'm home, I'm home. When I'm in the office, I'm in the office.
And half the battle is knowing it and embracing that reality, right? I think that human beings crave to be accepted and we crave to be loved.
Sure.
I think women crave love more. Men crave significance more. Oftentimes, as men, we can get caught up in our significance of our identity being tied to our work,
right?
Our vocation. What do we do and how great and how quote unquote successful. And we can sacrifice the true success, which is the success that's at home,
right,
in life, right? And what God has really laid out for us to be and do in the legacy that we're ultimately here to hopefully leave. So let me shift. Let's throw in a couple of fun questions for a second. So,
okay.
Let's see. What kind of hidden talents do you have? I mean, look, I know, first of all, John Flores is an amazing athlete, an incredible golfer, but what kind of hidden talents do you have that I don't know about?
Man, that's a really good question. I was going to say, I can play golf a little bit, but it's not hidden, right? I mean, you just exposed it and I think it's candidly been exposed.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. I'm a massive practical joker. So I don't know if that's a talent, but it's like a hobby.
Yeah,
if I could monetize it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I mess with Amy all the time and it drives her crazy. I don't know why I do it. I mean, she's literally like, if you knew what that did to me, you wouldn't do it. But
you find humor in it, right?
Yeah. And I'm an idiot and I don't learn from it. That's not really a hidden talent. I love to make up games.
I was going to say, if you can't find one, I know one.
Yeah.
And it's game. He loves to do games.
I love to do games, whether it's like formally for game nights, or if it's, I've got a ping pong ball in my hand sitting on the couch and there's a bookshelf. I'm going to see if I can, throw the ping pong ball to keep it on the top book, just random crap like that. Yeah. Right. Again, it's not a hidden talent. Can't do much with it, but it's always just spinning around my head all the time.
Yeah. Hey, it's a talent. I'll say it is a talent. So, all right. So, what things do you do in your personal life? Are there things that you do personally? Because look, as a leader at Promise, on boards that you're on, other things you're doing, you're constantly kind of giving and speaking out. I mean, you epitomize a servant leader, and I mean that sincerely. And I don't mean to embarrass you, but that's true.
I appreciate that.
But what do you do in your personal life so that you can grow as a leader to feed yourself?
Great question. For me, a little bit of this goes back to balance, right? When I'm home, I'm home.
Yeah.
And so I'm not typically bringing work in, and some careers demand that you do this, right? You get your kids in bed, and I've heard people that work at EY and PwC, their laptops come back out. Maybe mine should a little bit more, but it just doesn't. And part of that's just my personality. When I'm done, I'm just done.
Yeah.
Now, could I rest better? Could I honor the Sabbath better?
Sure.
For sure.
Yeah,
and do I need some more discipline in that area of my life? Yes. I think that I'm naturally resting well, even with 4 kids. But that's a big thing for me is when I'm home and I'm off the clock, like I want to be home and off the clock. In terms of growing as a leader, and my dad makes fun of me for this, but I want to be knowledgeable in every conversation that I'm in, right? So it's well-roundedness, right?
Yeah.
And so I got into this habit 2 years ago that when I get out of the shower in the morning, I turn on the Xfinity app on my phone and I watch CNBC.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, I've grown as a leader because of just the knowledge that what's happening across multiple sectors, and nonprofit pops up, right? And it's through the lens of the market, right? It has educated me more than the classroom. Yeah. And they've got different diverse speakers that are on there, communicators talking about a range of topics. So it's just separating a little bit of how do I, rest and experience restoration at home outside the workplace. But in terms of being a leader, that's something that's really helped me a lot, along with podcasts and books and that sort of thing. Yeah. But that's something that I do really religiously every day for 18 to 20 minutes. Yep. And I feel like I'm just sort of, the knowledge box is checked that day in terms of what's happening in the economy and the world, and how that kind of moves up and into leadership on a day-to-day perspective. Yeah.
Well, feeding our minds, right? I mean, feeding our bodies. We talk about eating healthy and then feeding our minds and our hearts with things that, and information. I mean, in this case, CNBC, you're feeding it with knowledge so that you can have some perspective on a macroeconomic perspective. But I talk about that a lot with our children. Just like, what are we putting, what kind of, what are we listening to, whether it's music or a podcast, or what books are we reading, or what are we watching on TV? And how does that impact us, right? 100%. And help us grow. So, I think we all try to drip these little things on our children as we're trying to grow the next generation of leaders. And boy, is it tough. Let's play Michael J. Fox for a second. All right. Let's hop in our DeLorean.
All right.
Let's get in it. Let's go back to, 2004, maybe.
Okay.
2003, 2004. What type of advice, or what kind of advice would you give your younger self, now that you've acquired all this wisdom over time, and obviously continuing to acquire, but what kind of advice would you give your younger self?
I would tell 20-year-old John to work a lot harder. I was pretty lazy. I could have been a better student. I could have been way more disciplined. I could have been way more organized. All these life kind of foundational bricks that you reap later and greater. Sure. I was just immature.
Yeah, the compound over time. So whenever time we start it compounds from that point.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
I wish I would have saved more money at a younger age, or saved any money at a younger age.
Yeah.
I just wish I would have been more disciplined. Right? Because the older you get forced into being disciplined, or your life falls apart. Yeah. Right? With 4 kids and a wife and a job and different responsibilities. And so I would just say, you need to grow up as a 20-year-old. And there's stuff back in my past that sort of led to some of these immature things in life. Sure. But regardless, if I could go back, man, and I wish sometimes I had a time machine. Yeah. I'd just go, let me just get you for 30 minutes. Yeah. And just instill a little bit of wisdom. Yeah. Let me tell you what's coming. But you can avoid it by making some better decisions, with being disciplined, with being a little bit more heads down and focused. Gosh, I wish I could go back sometimes and do that.
But I'll let me flip that for a second though, and speak some truth that, I believe in the sovereignty of God and really all of these things. Cause I talk about this to myself all the time. Yeah. About, I could be this much further along. I could be, I really wish I would have done this or done that or whatnot. And I come back to in resting in truth that, God brought me, unbeknownst to me, but brought me and allowed me to walk through those things, or not do the things that I wish I could go back to my younger self and say, if you could just do this a little bit better, you'd grow and multiply quicker. But the reality of it is that he's got the time, right? He's got our time, and he knows exactly what our time is and how he's, how he's growing us. So.
Well, that's a great question. And even from the blips, in the life journey that I've experienced, right? You, for all intents and purposes, you learn more from them than the successes, right? So when we talk about these nuggets of being accountable and dependable, it's because I wasn't accountable and I wasn't dependable.
Right, that's right.
And so you learn, well, man, maybe I should be those things. And so I think that's really important. And I think too, even to your point, you talked earlier about what do you tangibly do to maintain rest and balance? It is that spiritual relationship, right, with the Lord of being rooted in him and abiding in him.
For sure.
And the perspective that gives. And we talk a lot about that with our kids, where if a problem exists or you face a problem today, there's always a solution, right? What's the perspective and the lens with which we look at a short-term situation, a long-term situation? What's God doing in it, right?
Yep.
So to your point, when you look back 20 years, that's crazy. It's been almost 20 years back to 2004. The joy and the journey, even the brokenness, seeing where God has been and where he's moved and what he's done and what he's taught and revealed and those types of things makes us who we are today, even though we're still supremely broken and insecure. But you're exactly right.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so let's land the plane here. I'm going to ask this question a little differently. I like to usually talk to my guests about, when the books are written about you one day, but let me frame it up a little differently. What is it when your family is looking back and they were to stand up and say, this is the legacy that my father left me? It's pretty heavy, right?
Yeah, sure is.
What does that look like?
It's interesting. The older I get, even at 38, those questions land very differently now, right, than going back to 2004,
of course,
when you're wifeless and kidless.
Yeah.
Because there is a line of sight to legacy, right? Yeah. Having kids and a spouse. And so I think about it a lot. I want my wife to know that I loved her deeply, even being a broken idiot sometimes.
Yeah. That's number one. I love it.
I want my kids to know that I loved them for who they are, not what they do. Which is a really, really big thing for me. We talk about it a lot at home, is regardless of what you do, I love you for who you are. My 11-year-old got a 81 on a math test a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, when I was a kid, I would have gotten my butt beat for that.
Right.
And she started crying. And I was like, no, wait, there's a but here.
Yeah, there's a but here.
And I don't care, because I've seen you work so hard, and you've put in the work. Like, I'm just proud of you. And so I want my kids to know that I love them for who they are, not what they do. And I honestly, I want to be seen as somebody who didn't take life too seriously. Yeah. Right. That life wasn't overly heavy. Sometimes it needs to be. Yeah. But it doesn't always have to be.
Right.
And so when I think about my kids looking at me when I'm gone and thinking about me, I want them to think about the practical joker.
Yeah.
When appropriate. That wasn't tied to his phone into the office. Yeah. That was present, right, over perfect. Yeah. I think those are things that when I really think of legacy, I think a lot about my mom's dad, who I kind of touched on a little bit earlier. Yeah. He really embodied all that. That's a big thing that's just sitting with me now, because a lot of what legacy will be defined as will be what my kids experienced in the four walls of our house. As kids. Yeah. Not when they're in college, not in the workforce. So, and it's flying by.
It flies.
Flying.
It flies.
And I read something.
But it's never too late to continue, right? I mean,
yes.
Because that lie replays itself in my head all the time. Like, you're screwing this up. You're screwing this up. It's too late. It's too late.
And I heard something on the radio the other day that the cumulative amount of eye contact a child gets on a weekly basis is 3 minutes. Like this type of eye contact.
That's sad.
And so I don't want it to be 3 minutes.
That's sad.
Right. So when you think of legacy, I'm not going to overcomplicate and articulate it. I want my kids to get more than 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. And so I find myself, and the more we talk about it, the more I think about it and be prayerful of it. When my 4-year-old at 5:30 or 6, when it's just chaos, right, and dinner's being made and we got practice coming up, and he's pulling on my shirt, like, you better know I'm going to try to get down on I don't do it all the time, but I'm going to get down on my knees. I'm going to look that dude in the eye.
Yep.
Right. Because it's got to be more than 3 minutes.
Got to be more than 3 minutes. Yeah. That's good. Well, look, unfortunately we're out of time here. But that was amazing. I really appreciate you joining and sharing with me. You've inspired me just sitting here to take that time at home and the things that we struggle with, and then we're intentional about for a short period of time, and then we struggle with them again, and coming in the door and putting our briefcase, our digital briefcase, our iPhone in the closet, right? And we don't need to look at it. And gosh, that's a scary statistic that our kids are getting a total of 3 minutes of eyeball time a day.
A week.
I mean, a week. That's
Even more
insane.
scary. Yeah.
John, you were absolutely a net giver, not a net taker. And I can tell you, well done.
Appreciate
for you.
that.
Not well said. So, guys, until next time, I hope you continue to, first of all, I hope you were inspired by today's guest. I know I was. Tune in for future episodes of the Above and Beyond Leadership podcast. Until next time, continue to lead well. Thanks, guys.